Now, Israeli police say a suspect in a ramming attack is still being investigated. According to the Israeli police, a Palestinian stole a car and rammed people in central Israel, injuring at least 13. Israeli media say some people may have also been stabbed in the incident in Ra'anana, north of Tel Aviv. Now, this comes amid heightened security tensions over the more than 3-month-old war with Hamas militants in Gaza. The injured were taken to hospitals for treatment.
In the city of Ra'anana, is suspect who is in police custody and believed to be a Hebron resident stole a vehicle and used it to commit multiple car ramming attacks. It's believed that he did steal additional vehicles to commit more attacks, but that suspect is in police custody at this time. We have a police helicopter that's in the air in order to scan the perimeter, as well as special police forces and other security agencies who arrived at the location to secure and make sure that our civilians are going to be safe. We have multiple casualties who were evacuated to nearby hospitals. I can't get into the specifics of their condition, but according to medical sources, they are in various conditions at this time.
How many people?
We're talking about upwards of 13, according to the medical sources.
The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he aims to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East after the US and Britain launched airstrikes on Yemen last week. Sunak says he wants to restore stability to the region and stressed that the airstrikes were proportionate, targeted action and military targets. Asked about the latest opinion poll forecast of a heavy electoral defeat, Sunak said the only poll that mattered was the national election, which must be held by January 2025, but which he has suggested will take place later this year.
Our aim is to de-escalate tensions in the region and actually restore stability back to the area. We faced an escalating series of attacks from the Houthis on commercial shipping, including an attack on Royal Navy warship. That's unacceptable. It was right that we took proportionate, targeted action against military targets to send a strong message that that behaviour is unacceptable. It was a last resort. As I said, we will not hesitate to ensure the security and safety of British people and our interests and our assets. There have been lots of polls over the last year. There'll be hundreds more polls. The only one that matters is the one when the general election comes. And the choice of that election is clear. It's to stick with our plan that is working. It's delivering change for people, ensuring that they can have the peace of mind that there's a brighter future for their children, that we can have renewed pride in our country, or the alternative, which is Keir Starmer and going back to square one with him.
Well, for more on this, Arise News special correspondent Karl Bostic joins me now. Karl, good to see you and thanks for your time. Just when we thought there were some kind of, should I say, sucker, we're seeing some form of violence, as in car ramming, which has just happened in that region where you are at the moment. Please help us give an update of what exactly the situation is at the moment, Karl.
Hi, good evening. You're exactly right. I mean, look, we're 100 days into this war. In fact, today is the 101st day. And what you need to keep in mind is this is not about a war with Israel fighting Hamas in Gaza. This is a war that has so many implications because there are lots of different fronts. You know, people talk about the front in the north with Lebanon, Hezbollah, that's heavily armed. They have rockets and missiles that could strike as far here as Tel Aviv, where I am. There are fronts in the West Bank, and we talk about the Houthis. But there's also Israel proper, and that's a concern, and that's what happened today. And it's not an isolated incident. You know, from what we know, and the numbers will keep changing, just even from the reports you've mentioned, this happened about 1:30 in the afternoon. Ra'anana is an Israeli suburb. I'm in Tel Aviv. It's about a 20-minute drive from here, about 25 miles driving. A town of 60,000. Apparently, what we now know is that this suspect, he carjacked a car belonging to an Israeli 70-year-old woman, stabbed her. She later died from her wounds. So that's one killing right there. And he was with her brother. He was with his brother. Those two are Palestinians from the West Bank. We're now learning that they had previously worked in Ra'anana in a car wash. It's not clear if they had ever left um, Ra'anana after October 7th, because after October 7th, no Palestinians were allowed to work in Israel. That's a real big issue right there, because since then, because I'm sorry, because since then, 150,000 Palestinians have not been able to enter Israel. So they're saying, how did they enter Israel, or were they there illegally? But we're talking about not one, but two carjackings. And in the end, three vehicles that were used. I also spoke with a colleague I used to work with. He's Israeli, he's from Ra'anana. I asked him how things were there. To give you an idea just what this timeline was like, it happened at 1:30 in the afternoon today on Monday, but it took a half an hour because this carjacking, killing, and stabbing rampage lasted about half an hour. And amongst the rampage, they used the cars to run over people and to stab people. And that included school children or teenagers at a bus stop. I called my colleague, my friend who I used to work with, and he said, well, about five of those people who were injured were classmates of his son. Even the Israeli authorities are confirming up to 8 children or people under 18 were injured. So you have a 70-year-old woman who was killed. You have a 16-year-old teenager who's critically injured, and it raises questions about, could this happen again here in Israel proper? What are the merits of the policy of perhaps allowing Palestinians to return to work in Israel again? Because since October 7th, 150,000 day workers have not been able to work in Israel. That impacts their livelihoods. Some will argue that by not allowing them to work in Israel, that radicalizes them further and makes them more attractive to militant groups to recruit them. And then also, what happens the day after you allow some new governing authority? How can they control this? A lot of unanswered questions right there. And one final anecdote. Where I am in Tel Aviv, the cafes or restaurants I go to, already they're talking about, once again, hiring security guards at the entrance or even arming themselves with guns. And this last happened back about 20 years ago when I first came here. That was the second intifada. The new worry or concern right now is that, are we looking at a third intifada? That meaning an uprising that happens not only in the West Bank, but also in Israel, where you have these attacks. Back then, when I was here back 20 years ago, you were afraid or very careful about going to a restaurant, going to a club, or even getting on a bus, because you had attacks similar to what happened today happening there on a regular basis. And now that's a new worry concern. While we're in the midst of a war, or not, as far as while Israelis are in the midst of a war in Gaza.
I hope you landed there, Karl. Just before I let you go, you spoke about intifada, which is the fear that some people are already nursing, which is another form of extreme violence you get to see from the Palestinians. The car ramming incident is one, targeting the very vulnerable. Please, is there any word on the identity of this gentleman who was at the back of the car?
They were two brothers from the same family. They were from a village near Hebron. They were in the West Bank, and this is really a very ongoing investigation, because authorities want to know simply either A, how did they get to Ra'anana, or did they never leave? Because one of them, at least one of them, the 44-year-old, he had worked in a car wash there. The younger person, 25 years old, was his brother. And maybe they never left after October 7th, or they legally entered. The point is, they were illegal residents inside Ra'anana. And that's what happened. And that's why you have a very divided government and society about whether Palestinians in the West Bank should be allowed to enter Israel again during this time of war, especially when you have attacks like this that could happen again. For example, I'm here in Israel, and that was like 20 minutes away from where I am.
Karl Bostic, many thanks as always. All right, special correspondent live there in Tel Aviv.